I love seeing the big smile on your face. Um,
Yeah.
Good morning,
Good
and
morning, Riley.
happy to see you. Happy New Year. Actually, I don't think we've talked since the New Year. This is now, we're in 2025 as of recording. But just
Happy New Year.
for people listening, thank you that haven't heard of you or met you yet. Um, I was just kind of browsing some of your background, and I saw this one. You actually wrote this, so I don't want to take credit for it, but you wrote this sentence about kind of who you are and what you do,
Mm.
and you'd said that you help CEOs, founders, and senior leaders strengthen
Mm-hmm.
their leadership presence,
Mm-hmm.
craft compelling narratives, and foster cultures where people and organizations thrive. But the coolest part is, not only does that sound amazing, kudos to you, but you don't just talk about that. A couple lines down, you also said that you've had over 420 coaching sessions in the span
Mm.
of what was it, like 2, 3
Two
years?
years, yeah.
And 2 years, which is nuts. So I just so people get a sense of like where you're actually coming from. And in my recent meetings and our recent conversations, you just ooze experience and a wealth of knowledge. And so saying all that, we will dive into all sorts of different topics here. But for people who want a little bit more, and not just in my voice, but in your voice, a little more of a flavor of who you are, can you just introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, my name is Cathy Dixon. I'm British. I was born in Lincolnshire. I spent a lot of time in London, and for my work, I'm a coach. I'm an executive coach with a lot of education, I think, which training. And I've worked for private, public, and the entrepreneurial sector. So I understand working with governments, working with businesses, corporations, and also working with startups, working with entrepreneurs and founders. And my, I suppose my USP is the amount of, and this comes from my own passion of the wellness field. That's where I would base my foundational knowledge. And the coaching for me is the relational part. It's who I am. I care about people. I care about health. And I care about quality, which means if you're going to have a great person, Riley, you need to put them in a place where they're going to succeed. And that's the environment. That is the environment. So if the environment is healthy, then that person, if they're talented and supported, they can reach the challenges. That I think is absolutely crucial. We've got very much focus on the individual, but what I look at it is also the system of where is this person who has been recruited for their talent and skills, whether they're a CEO or if they're a programmer, it doesn't matter what they do, but is the environment itself supportive of them?
I heard you say the word healthy,
Yeah.
and obviously health, wellness, like it's a massive topic, a massive industry space. And there's a little bit of nuance between coach, trainer, consultant,
Mm.
facilitator. Those are slightly different and very overlapping skill sets.
Hmm.
Working with people, we'll just say. But
Exactly.
then the knowledge of health and wellness, I think, is a different domain, and obviously the two fit together very nicely. But um, I wanna talk about the word healthy and
Hmm.
kind of use that to go deeper here. And by the way, you said USP earlier, unique selling point, for
Hmm.
anyone that doesn't know that. And so part of that uniqueness, right, it comes from your knowledge and experience as well with this space. So in your opinion, how would you even define healthy? Like, can we start there? I
Oh,
know
well,
it's a yeah.
yes, let's start there. Um, Healthy is a place where I think it's a feeling as well as a fact. So
Ooh,
your blood
okay.
results can say, yes, your cholesterol is in the right position and everything's working. But it's also a feeling, how you feel in yourself. So it's a combination of the objective and the subjective, first of all. And as human beings, we have a lot of agency in creating our health. So the DNA, we may be born with a certain genetical code, which might dictate future outcomes. but there's a lot we can do for ourselves, especially in the preventative field. And that's what really interests me. What can we do to ourselves, to our families, to our communities to make them healthy? And I would take probably and I use this a lot, you know, we are both the plant and the garden. So let's say that we see ourselves as a plant. We're also existing in a garden, in an ecosystem. So we will flourish also according to the ecosystem we put ourselves in. And some plants need a very specific kind of self-care routine. Others would kind of thrive in most places. And it's understanding that. And each individual is made differently. So it isn't one size fit all when it comes to health. It's actually starting with knowing yourself deeply, knowing your patterns, knowing your energy. Where is it? And so healthy is optimum conditions, really, to engage in life, to engage with other people, to engage in the team where you find yourself. And I think you know that when you feel, and people say off, I don't have the vibe, you kind of feel that. You also know when you're in a supportive environment in work, when you know when you're not in a supportive. You don't need to be told that.
Right.
Um,
Optimum conditions. I love that phrase. I think that's a beautiful definition, and it also speaks to well, there's the internal and the external. And just to make sure I'm understanding the plant and the garden analogy correctly, because I think so many arguments or debates, at least that I've heard or had in the past, come down to the whole nature versus nurture conversation. And almost every time, I can't think of any instance where it's not a little bit of both. Uh, and so it sounds like kind of what you're saying is in a similar vein, in that the plant and the garden, you can't really separate them. They're linked.
well, the difference is the plant is planted and we can walk. We've got two legs. We can go to a different environment, okay? But we are made in a certain way. We're created in a certain way. And that will also rely in the way that we create our own health. So I think that's going to be very, very, that is big. And it's only going to get bigger. How we create our own health with what we eat, how we move, who we connect with, to enhance what we've already got. That our nutrition, there's so many elements of this. Yet, even if you take someone who is inherently healthy and you put them in a very unhealthy environment, that is going to impact them. So it's not just the individual, it's the system where they operate.
So I totally agree with that, by the way. And even in my own experience, if you, I mean, I think a really easy way, at least for me, to wrap my head around that is if you think of like a relationship. You can, or even, I'm sure that anyone listening has been in an argument with a spouse, partner, colleague, whoever. And if you come to work that day, having been in a heated discussion, you're probably not, it's not the optimum conditions to be very productive at work that day. And so that might be a whole other can of worms, but I, I think I'm really interested in this when you talked about the subjective versus objective and uh, the feelings and the facts. So it seems like to me that what you're describing is there's certain things that are just they are what they are, like a blood test result, that it is. It is what it is. However, and there's probably some universal truths, like what a good blood pressure is, or red blood cell count, or whatever, things like that. I have no medical training, so I'm going to stop talking about that for a second here. But the interpretation of that and what is a good condition and what good even is, I think this starts to get into the kind of the self-knowledge kind of a conversation, self-awareness. But it seems like it's got to be grounded in something. It's not just a feeling. It's not 100% subjective. So can you speak to that and kind of add some context there?
Well,
So, yeah.
we're adapting all the time. I'm adapting as I speak to you. It would be different if I was speaking to you in person and sitting next to you. But I'm on digital space, so I'm adapting. So you said there is a fact. So the fact is, your blood pressure or your blood count or whatever you have. But then there's what we can do about that. There's our own agency in that. That's what I'm talking about. It's not saying this is, I think we need to combine the medical world, the data, which is amazing, with also what we know about how to look after ourselves and realize. And I think that preventative initiative that we can take to enhance what the conditions are. The conditions are going to change. They're not always going to be pristine. They're not always going to be optimum. But I think if we measure that, if we know, we can prepare, we can adapt, we can, just for example, you've got a big day coming up. You need to sleep a bit more. You need to hydrate a bit more. There's things that you can do to meet those conditions. Right?
How do you know that? How do you know that, though?
I think it's actually being in tune with who you are, the way you feel, knowing what 10 looks like in you. You're like, oh, bursting with energy. I can't wait to get started. You're kind of dragging yourself into doing something. So therefore, there's the motivation, there's the inner motivation. And there's also a sense of confidence, I suppose, because you do feel ready. And also seeing this with something that you can change. You can say, okay, I felt a bit tired. Maybe I need a bit of a rest there. I felt out of my depth. Was that because I didn't know the subject knowledge? So there's the analysis of what it is. And knowing when you're really way out, you say there's something not right. I know I'm not feeling well. That's the time to find out what's going on.
The self-reflection piece.
Yeah, the self-reflection. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something that you think just naturally happens?
No, I don't actually. I don't. Unless you are by nature a very reflective person, it's something that we can curate in ourselves. We can develop that in ourselves. But that is part of self-knowledge. Thanks for bringing that up, Riley. I think that reflection of what went on there, and also being how am I talking to myself?
Self-talk.
Am I actually supporting myself, or am I condemning myself? Am I criticizing myself? Because that's going to have an impact as well. So it's that self-reflection is a time to ask what's going on here. And my preferred tool is to journal. And I've done that for many, many years. That's how I built my own practice. And I'm still practicing. I'm not perfect. I don't think I'll ever be perfect at all. But I think with the journaling, it's really helped me develop a skill set. And that's what I mean. That's an acquired skill set. I wasn't innately born with that.
Can you describe your journaling practice for anyone listening? And it sounds like a potentially really useful practice.
So first of all, it doesn't matter how you do this. Some people say, well, if you use a notebook, I've just got one here. I've always got one with me. Whether you use a digital tool, whether you use prompts, but I think it's a space to reflect. So some people would actually speak into a microphone, and that's their self-reflection. So I think the method belongs to the individual. Find out, try several things and what actually works for you. But I think it's the consistency of doing this which really counts. It isn't even if I do I journal for an hour a day? I don't. Mine's about 10 minutes now. But I think I always start with an intention every day. I always start with that. So what's today about? How am I going to face today?
That's the first question that you ask yourself.
That's the first question I ask myself. What is today about? And it might be the same word every day if that's what you need. I just need to be present and I need to be in full learning mode if that's where you are, the environment. So you fine tune that every day. The second thing I put on my journal, because I'm taking a little bit of some supplements at the moment, is to remember to take them. So there's something about creating a pattern. And again, this depends whether you're reflecting on the day before or something else. But I tend to reflect on the day before what happened. So with the distance, when I start in the morning, I usually write about the day before. Now, not everybody's going to do this, by the way, Riley. It doesn't mean the way I do it is the right way. It's the way I do it. And I started with a system where I have an intention for the day. So that's almost like leading, this is the energy of the day that I need to be in. If there's anything I need to take for my own well-being, like supplements or whatever it is, I remind I'm doing that. I've just remembered to do that. And I just reflect on how the other day was. Now, as a backdrop against this, usually at the beginning of the year, I write several targets or goals for the year, but that also gets broken down month by month or week by week. And then I reflect in my journal about, am I following the map? And with me, there's usually a bit of a detour. Okay, that's the way I'm made. And
I
there's
think with
always a detour.
most people.
Okay, then with me, it's like, all right. But I think it's important to have a destination. So I start with a
Yeah.
destination, a destination for my business, a destination for my podcast, if that's what I'm doing, a destination for my relationships too. And that gives me a sense of being in charge. Notice I didn't say in control. I said in charge, because I will take responsibility and accountability for that. So I create an overall plan for the year, and I've done that for many, many, many years with a big theme. I break that down into month by month, week by week, day by day, and that creates the consistency. And by the way, this is not natural to me. This is something I needed to learn for me to function.
Yeah, I mean, we all hear about SMART goals.
Yeah.
I think that's from like the 60s originally or something like that. And I remember learning about goal setting in a performance psychology environment from a sports psychologist.
Yeah.
And we actually, in the program that my business partner and I host, like we talk a lot about that. And the process that I've learned and that we teach our clients sounds very aligned with what you're describing.
Okay.
And so I think just a shortcut to the end of that, it's the breaking it down, and also that you're getting daily reminders of this is the thing I said was important. This is the thing I said was important. And so if I were to recap what I'm hearing from you in terms of this little practice, this little nugget for people, it's the practice consists of having the space to reflect wherever that space is, as long as you are holding it for you and it's something that's accessible, journal, online, digital, whatever. So that's number one. Number two is the intention, which it sounds like, I mean, the question that came up in mind was, how do you decide that intention? But I think you answered that question already with, well, you should have some sort of direction, some sort of goals. And so how does this map there? And then it seems like the third piece is the very tangible, okay, what am I doing? What do I need to be reminded of? Like my supplements, or maybe there's a first priority or task, or it depends on what the day brings, right?
Yeah. So I think the journal can be, it can really serve you. So it can serve as a memory. Okay, for those of us, especially at my age, it's like I want to remember the actual facts. So I use that very much for what actually happened. So I can look back and there's a testament to that. But it's also a space to ask questions. Like, how could I turn this into a positive? What is the best thing for me to do with this information? And that's very powerful, because you live the question then. And what I mean by that is that you're not looking for an immediate answer or solution, but you're allowing yourself to process it, and you're allowing that information to come back to you, especially if it's a big question. Like, and I hear that with my clients, like, should I even be doing this job anymore? That kind of question, am I in the right lane anymore? But I think when you journal, you don't push that question away. You don't go back into your automatic pilot. You go back to the question because it was your question. And it could be answered with, yes, I'm absolutely right. I'm just having a bad day or a bad week, or this is not aligned to who I am. I need to choose something differently. And so there's the reflective space that can come out through the journaling.
Have you heard of the confirmation bias, psychological phenomenon?
I have, yes. Yes, I have heard of
It
that.
kind of makes me think of that, except I think a lot of times it's used in a negative context, but I think it can go either way. Maybe another term is like the grass is greener where you water it. And so wherever you are giving attention to is kind of where energy will flow. And that's also, it's exactly what you're saying. Are we looking for, like, what are we looking out for today? What are the questions we're asking ourselves or the universe or whoever you want to ask, I guess.
Absolutely.
But that space piece and the habit around it it sounds really important.
Exactly, Riley. And I think it's the relationship to you.
Ooh, yeah.
It's the relationship to you. That's a sacred space to develop a relationship to
I
yourself.
don't think a lot of people think about that
Yeah.
relationship to you. How would you prioritize that relationship in your
That
opinion, in your own world?
relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it might be a deep dive into another little space here, but I think the relationship to yourself, to me, needs to be a dynamic one, because I'm in relationship to my own world, to my own to what everything I do. But I'm
When
not the
you say
same.
dynamic, is this like an open relationship with yourself? I'm kind
No,
of like,
I
where
think
is this
that.
going?
Well, I think I'm getting information all the time from
Uh-huh.
where I am, and I might have a plan, and I do have a plan, but there's more information coming through every single day about that. So the relationship to myself is to stay true to the values that I have. So we start there, but also that things are changing as they should. Okay, they're changing, and so I'm bringing myself along with that change, because that is the thing that we have in life. The only thing we can actually promise is change is there. It can be very slow change or very rapid change, depending on our circumstances. But coming back to that relationship to self, it's, have I asked myself how I feel? Have I asked myself, is this the right track for me? Have I asked myself some very, very important questions before I respond or I react to a situation and I haven't quite checked in? So what I'm saying is, it creates your own voice and it creates your own rhythm, and you're in relationship with the journal. And so I think there's something about creating space for the journal,
Yeah,
whether that's talking on how you do it. There's multiple ways, but I think it's the consistency of and what is the focus of your life at the moment. So is it about rebuilding your health? Okay, is it about rebuilding a relationship, getting over a divorce? Is it an addiction? And I've worked for over 5 years in that field, and that's where a lot of my knowledge comes from, about what we're talking about, because the everyday counts. The everyday counts when you're trying to change something. Well, actually, more than that, you're trying to transform something. You're not going to see that in a single day. The event might happen in a single day, like the relationship might break up in a single day. But how you recover from that is a dynamic process. And so when you journal and you reflect, and also you're in conversation, obviously, with other people, but it's a sense to get, where is my head, where is my heart, where is my gut in this space.
it reminds me a lot of just mindfulness training in having the observing self.
Yes.
Um, and if this is brand new for anyone hearing this, or never like the third eye, it's very much that idea of creating the separation between like I'll put it this way: you have your brain and you have your mind, and they're not the same thing. And this, I almost am reminded of when you were describing the objective versus subjective as well. But you brought up this, so this space piece, right? This is the sacred. It sounds like that's what allows that narrative to happen between, well, you and yourself. And obviously, if this is sounding difficult to anyone, I think that's where having some outside help, like a coach or
Yeah.
someone who can facilitate that is, or even just to hold you accountable to build the habit. I mean, I think that's really important. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. You're building a habit. And
Yeah.
by the way, we're having an experience, we're in that experience. And we could go into the philosophy of the separation, but we're having a relationship. And when you have a coach or a therapist or a friend even who's saying, how are you getting on with that? You're coming from a deeper space of awareness. Because you say, I'm fine, it's good, I'm all good. Or you could have it a little bit more depth because you asked yourself that question.
One thing you
Yeah.
mentioned that I want to ask about is, it kind of goes back to the subjective piece. So we have this space, we're maintaining it, we have a good relationship with ourselves, we're building that narrative, we're improving our self-talk, let's just say, we're pointed in the direction, like we're aligned with our goal, like everything sounds great. And yet, we all have good days and bad days.
Yes.
And one thing you mentioned was seeing how you're feeling in this moment or in this day. Like, does this feel good or does this feel bad? And one thing I'd be really curious to get your opinion on is, in my experience, I think some people avoid that completely. They don't want to go into their feelings at all. And then others lean into it so hard that it seems like they have lost all direction because they're only going off of feeling. And if it doesn't feel right, quote unquote, I mean, but you could say, well, eating chocolate feels good, so I'm going to eat chocolate every
Okay.
day. So how do you get what I'm coming from? So where do you draw the line here? How do you find the right balance?
I'm so glad you'd asked that, because this is black and white thinking, isn't it? It's very extreme. It's either this or this. And I believe that there's the nuance. There's a whole palette of colors we can talk about with one thing. What does good actually? So I think it's developing the language here, developing a language of description, because that allows you to access what you're really feeling. If you have two states, it's either good or bad. That it feels a bit static. But if you say, I'm feeling apprehensive about something, rather than nervous, apprehensive means, well, that could be because you've never done this before. And it's a natural feeling to feel apprehensive about something you've never done before, because you don't know. So apprehension is maybe a better word than highly anxious. We can go to the hyperbolic straight away, where actually there's a step before, which allows us to just calms down our nervous system and to breathe. So I think what you were asking was the highly analytical space of that, and the more the emotional and the feeling space. I think there's room for both, first of all. That's who we are. We operate through our analysis of the situation, when we need our deep focus, where we need to say these are the facts. And we also operate through our feelings, because a lot of information comes through that. And it's maintaining a balance between the two.
It reminds me of delivering a parent workshop for the Olympic Development Program, which is like a youth soccer organization up in the Northeast. I was in Massachusetts at the time, and there was, I don't know, 110, 120 parents. I was 20 something. I was very nervous to stand in front of, this crowd of people for the first time. And their kids are being coached by all these amazing, incredible athletes and trainers and coaches. And funny enough, the irony is I was delivering a presentation on emotional regulation. And one of the key points that seemed to really resonate with that audience was I told them about how, listen, so often, first of all, you are not the coach, you are not the sports psychologist, you are just the parent. So let's define that role first. But then secondly, to better understand that role in the relationship with their kid and what they're experiencing, sometimes they might feel as a parent, upset when they see that their kid is upset or their kid is angry or on the field, because we typically think of anger, let's say, as a bad, quote unquote, emotion. And happy, good, and we kind of prescribe or ascribe these labels. And what we talked about in that presentation was that rather than labeling something as good or bad, we said within the given context, so it makes me think of your optimum conditions, does this state, feeling, expression, experience, etc., does this help or does this hurt?
Okay.
And that seemed to be a much more effective filter to use, rather than immediately labeling something or good or bad.
Exactly.
And I'm curious, it sounds like that overlaps quite a bit with the creating this space for the narrative, the specificity of, let's not just lump something into black and white, good or bad, but actually where is it on the spectrum, the palette of colors and feelings, I think is what you were talking about.
And if anybody, there are so many good slides. You can just Google spectrum of emotional language and just start to integrate some of that. And on that matter of the parenting, this is a recent example of someone I know very, very well. He's 18 years old, very bright, very capable young man. He's going to go far in life, but also very in touch with his feelings, and using a disappointment. And he had a big disappointment, in not getting to where he wanted to go. But we leveraged that for his next challenge. We leverage that. And this is where I come into, it's so important for our young people to understand that they are going to get challenged. And this was a big one. It was a big disappointment for him. But what we did was, what are we learning from this experience? And what would you do different next time? There's no greater teacher than that. It's in your life. You realize I didn't get to what I wanted. And you've got another chance. So let's apply the learning and that growth mindset, which is I'm learning through the feedback. And let's apply it and let's see what happens now. And also dialing in to the very thing he needed, which was more time and to feel much calmer about his preparation rather than taking it to the edge and going with, with how do you say, when you cling on to something and you do something with high anxiety, you can do it, but it has a price. So there was some learning for him in that experience, and he really learnt it. And I'm pleased to say that the next application went very differently. So that's what I'm talking about. When you start to have those conversations with yourself and through the journaling, and you're deeply reflective about what, and instead of saying, this was terrible, you say, what happened there? What was good? What wasn't good? How can I be different in the next situation? What do I need to learn? Who can support me? All of those questions can be in the journal. And for him in particular, I think he's 18 years old, with incredible results.
It seems like I almost feel like I want to say it's a that non-judgmental space, but I actually think if to
I
use the
might
word
I actually, we do judge ourselves. We are I'm a very opinionated person, anybody
Exactly.
who knows me, but I hold them quite lightly because
Yeah.
we are opinion-making machines. That is how could we, if we don't have any discernment, how do we go through life? Everything's good, because we're told it's so. We need some critical thinking skills for ourselves, for everyone. So we come
we're
to that.
we're
So
judgment machines.
we're judgment machines, and to
Yes.
pretend otherwise. But I think what we can do is hold them lightly to say, I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
I got that wrong. You were right.
Right.
That is such it's human, but it's also so good for the way that we can grow and develop in this situation.
Strong opinions held lightly, I
Strong
think
opinions held lightly. And,
yeah.
you know, that could be, and I think sometimes the need to be right overrides the need to learn. And that's why I love Carol Dweck's work, because she's the authority on this.
Yeah.
And I think that need to learn and to lean in and to, especially if it's your first time, it might not be perfect. It might be nowhere near perfect. In fact, perfect is not a good part of the vocabulary. But I think optimum is a great word, because it's where I can be at this moment with what I've got. And I'm doing everything I can. I'm giving everything I've got. And it's not quite the outcome I want, but I'm learning. And I'm learning, I should say, and I'm learning.
So So judging is part of the process. It's okay. It's just the snap judgment. It's the black and white, the extreme jump to one conclusion without observing or engaging.
Well, the judgment is, I'm terrible. I failed again. It doesn't give you the strength to go back. And that's the thing. And that's what I learned through the addiction space. Right, I spent 5 years of working in clinics with people who had their lives decimated and destroyed, and they came from all sorts of backgrounds. But they needed to learn this. They needed to learn to take life one day at a time. That's what I took away, that they are the experts at tuning in to change something which governed their life. And they needed to turn that around and look at everything in their life, everything. And that self-judgment, is only dialed into how bad you are, is so damaging for your own self-esteem and your own self-worth. And they know that. So I draw a lot on that experience in my journaling and in my work, actually, because I know that that's a very difficult change process that is not done easily, right?
So let's talk about that change, the one day at a time piece, because I think we often look at the peak performers and the CEOs and executives in that space. And so a lot of times it carries with it a certain connotation. Like, those people are very driven, they push hard. But again, spectrum, right? It's not black and white. So with that said, one thing we talked about before we turned on the recording here was uh, how do you even define productive? And so when you talk about
Well,
one day at a time and getting better, and I'm using air quotes for people just listening, the
well,
1% better each day. How do you,
okay.
let's talk about that. How do you even define what is better? What does that even mean?
Well, we're going deep here, Riley. We're going deep here. But there is this productivity, which is we have to grow every single day. That's the price of, okay, I have to grow every single day. And it needs to be 1% better every single day. I want you to think very carefully about that because growth isn't this hockey stick. It can be at the beginning, which is why it can be exciting. You're trying something new and you're learning huge amounts. So there does feel this hockey stick from here to there very rapidly. But once you get a competence doing something, or you get familiar, ask any musician, ask any writer, ask anybody who's got a profession which is somewhat about applying something, then it gets more difficult to discern what that 1% is. And there's also a maintenance that is needed. So if you've done a lot of energy and a lot of, let's say, input to get to a certain level, there may be a plateau that needs to exist to embed that. So if you're saying, well, I haven't done well today because I'm not 1% better, then you're discounting the natural process of growth. And actually, in nature itself, and this is what I learned through when I studied 5 elements through shiatsu and acupuncture, life is a circle anyway. There is a time where we'll grow rapidly, and that's usually the spring in Chinese medicine. Well, we'll have the harvest. But there's also the autumn where we start to shed, and then there's winter where we hibernate. So there is a natural cycle in nature. But in our own lives, it's no, we just need push, 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 1% better, 1% better. And often that's in very much economic terms.
Yeah,
My business
quarter
needs
over
to be
quarter.
that because we are a quarter over quarter, 1% better. And that is exhausting. And it's not actually, is it sustainable? I don't know. So I just say,
Yes.
when people say, well, I'm not 1% better, I say, you've reached a really good place. Maybe this is a time to maintain that before you do. If I know you're from a sports background, Riley. So if you're climbing, you don't just climb continually. There are times where you go through a ledge, aren't there? And you might even go down a bit to take the next climb. If you think about, and I think about when I lived in Italy, I did a lot of mountain climbing. It was like that. It was up and down and across and looking at the next, taking a bit of a breath to say, that's my next target. So you need to be mindful of what's actually going on.
I think when I worked as a mental performance coach, we talked quite a bit about recovery and active recovery and rest, and
Hmm.
I think that's in my opinion, I would say that gets baked in to what we're talking about here, and yet completely overlooked, and it's almost I would call it a fact, just like people have to sleep. It's just like you will have a period, roughly a third of your day, uh, that is unproductive. Like if you want, again, I'm using air quotes here, but
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
you are not doing something, and yet what you kind of still are when you think of it from a peak performance perspective, you are actively recovering. And it doesn't just have to be sleep. There are other things that, if you look at professional athletes, they do all sorts of things to
Mm.
recover as quickly as possible. But I think if you zoom in, what I love your, well, maybe not quite a circle, but the plateau.
Mm.
I'll go to that. It's kind of like, I think a lot of times we see the charts of whether it's a hockey stick or a curve that goes up and to the right, um, on whatever economic chart you're looking at. And that's sort of the expectation, is that there's a smooth, whether it's linear or exponential or whatever, the smooth line, and maybe it goes up and down a little bit, but it's always growing. And when you zoom in on it, just like if you looked at like the stock market, it's actually very jagged, and it's more like a heartbeat, in a sense.
Exactly.
And if you got real close, I think you would see what you're describing as I would almost imagine like a staircase, these steps. And so you have this next step, this level up, this growth, and then in an ideal world you maintain it. If for and it depends on what level you're at when you're really early on with developing a new skill or reaching a new level in your business or whatever the thing is. Um, it might be that you take this step and then you're there for days or weeks or months or years. It depends on what we're talking about, but it's only when you zoom out do you see that turn into this beautiful curve chart. But actually, it's really just a series of these little baby steps that happen days or even moments at a time.
Exactly, Riley. But when we notice every day, I actually had an Instagram called What You Notice. Okay. I did it for a few years. I just used to take pictures of wherever I was. And it was like, are you noticing where you are? That was really my message. And I think that when you notice every day, and you might notice, I've been here a long time and I haven't challenged myself. You kind of wake yourself up out of your comfort in a way because you are fully recovered. It's time to move on. I think it's what I know about people is that we need time to be productive. And sometimes we work in systems which, first of all, there's a system of productivity, 1% better. There's the whole self-help industry, which is full of books about how to be 1% better, how to max out, how to over-optimize. And this is all great stuff, by the way. It's all good, some good science there. But I think it's reflecting back from person to person. For some people, that will be absolutely great advice. They need it. But it's not great for everybody. And it's being a little bit more nuanced than just applying that template to your own life to say, well, why am I not improving 1% every day? Because you're not at that stage in your life. It's complex and it's not answered by, it's very seductive to say 1% better every single day. It's very seductive and it's very attractive. But actually the reality is, as we've described, sometimes that's not possible. We're not in that cycle.
It sounds like it sets up false expectations, which it can be extremely damaging. And one thing that we do with our clients from a mindset perspective is this idea of I call it I'm sure you've heard of minimum viable product in the
Yeah.
business space. So we borrow that idea, but I think of it as a minimum viable commitment. And I actually first stumbled across this working as an academic advisor for a college athlete. And it was, I mean, I think it was like writing his paper. It's like, oh, if I feel overwhelmed and I have this task to do, so you could apply this to any setting. And I said, well, do you have time to do it? And the answer was yes, because we almost always have time or you need to make time. And it was just the actual getting yourself to do it. The same way that if you have an injury, getting out of bed, or if you have an illness, whatever the thing is. And I said, could you just sit in front of your computer for even 5 minutes? But I think we said 15. And if you don't type a word, fine. But you're not allowed to do anything else other than
Okay.
sitting in front of. That is your minimum viable commitment. You can commit to 15
Ah.
minutes. And if it turns in, and if you get on a roll and it turns into 20 or 30 or an hour, great. But that's it. You're almost kind of tricking your brain, kind of like if you wanted to go for a run, but you feel like if I didn't run at least 5 miles, it's not worth it. But if you just say, if I'm just outside for 5 minutes with my running shoes on, that is good enough. And whatever happens after that, if I want to go a little further, great. And it's just enough to kind of get us started. And it really comes down to the habit formation, is sort of the idea behind it. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering if to build on that idea, because it seems like it can easily get conflated with the 1% better expectation that can be so damaging. And I'm wondering if you have some kind of some maybe health misconceptions. If we were to stay on kind of the health and wellness space, what are this
Well,
is kind of a mental frame in terms of the 1% better. But are there any other
yes.
ideas that get in the way of actually improving our health or giving us the optimum conditions for a healthy life?
So let's take one, which is this might be a trope, which is most people know, but there is a common myth: to change a habit, you need 21 days. 21 days of doing something consistently, and it's done.
Done forever?
Science does not support that.
No.
AA will tell you that's not how it works. They talk about 90 days actually. And that's why they give people a medal with 90 days when they come through an addiction, whatever that is, alcohol, anything. It's 90 days. And it's anywhere from that to 2 years to really set that into our physiology, our mental, emotional, physical, and also our ether. To this, it can take the time it takes. That's what I say. So the 21 days, that again, it's a seductive. Oh, for some people, it might have been 21 days because they were already ready, Riley. They'd already tried several times before. So the third time they were good to go. And it was actually 10 days, right? Because they were already in that space. For somebody else, it might take far, far longer. So if we take off the expectation of how it's going to take, we can just then focus on day by day. Some days it's going to feel really rough, really hard to do this thing that you've committed to. Other days it feels like a joy and a breeze. And that's what I'm saying of noticing it's not always going to be the same. Those conditions are not automatic. For when you're trying to change something really, really challenging. So that 21-day myth is something I was taught it when I was training in hypnotherapy. I was taught that, and I knew from my work in the addictive space that nobody actually said that. So I thought, well, these people have been through this, and the relapse rate is very, very high, and there are reasons for that. We started this conversation about the environment itself, and it was often to do with the environment rather than the individual anyway. But the ask, when it's very, very tough, we need to be mindful because we need to check in, how are we doing with this? And actually the other interesting thing is that if we do relapse, or we do not do the thing that we're setting out to do, having a mindful, so what happened there? And then getting back straight into the next day, or not letting our mindset stop us from continuing, because we've said, oh, I failed at that, I'm not going to try anymore. You say, okay, yesterday was rough, didn't feel like it, but today's a new day, I'm going to continue. And that over time is what I'm talking about. That time shows you the pattern change, not the one day when you're trying to do something big and meaningful to you. And it will be different from each. I say it's person to person. Some people are going to breathe through it. They're already ready. Other people, this is going to be a real challenge because it's so baked in to every single aspect of their life and their circumstances. So we need to take it on an individual by individual basis.
So let's throw out the 21-day trope. And let's say someone is coming to you, or let's just pretend you're the coach of this individual.
Yeah.
And they say, listen, I understand that it is individual. I know this is going to be a challenge. Mm-hmm. I'm ready for the challenge.
Okay.
And I'm committed to making it happen, but I've really got 30 days to make this happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, just to even get started.
Okay.
We're at this point. What do you tell that person?
We're talking in a business context. Are you talking in a business context?
No, it could be but yeah, let's give it some context.
Because the way I operate now is usually I work mainly with business professionals of some context.
Sure.
And they want to make a big change.
What would that change be?
Well, first of all, I ask them to describe what that change looks like, feels like. I get them to describe it and what kind of support they need throughout the change. So is it just me, or are there other people that can help them support this change? And I actually, Riley, what I do more than anything else is once we've got the destination sorted out in 30 days, if that needs to happen, is what's the process? What's the process that we need to do to actually make this a reality? So there's a very high, very challenging aspiration. And but we need to set up the middle bit, which is how we're going to do this. How much support, how much knowledge, how much feedback they need to be on target. So we're talking about something, we haven't described what the goal is. So I'm just talking very.
Yeah, let's say the goal is a promotion. Let's just say
okay.
And they're in a leadership position. They'd like to get to the next rung on the ladder.
Well, that's very specific. What is that? What is that rung in the ladder?
Sure.
So let's
You
see.
tell me.
What is
Yeah.
that rung on the ladder?
Uh-huh.
Do you know anybody else who's already there? First of all, is there someone else that you know, person? That's where the relationships come in that you can talk to. What is it going to benefit for you personally, professionally from taking that promotion? Is it right for you? That's another thing. It's very important. Some people maybe are much happy to be where they are at. And sometimes in promotions, it could be managerial and the person's more of a practitioner anyway. But let's say they are deciding they want that promotion. And does their documentation, are they ready? Are they prepared if there's an interview? Are they prepared with their papers? And I also help with that if that's necessary. Are they prepared in their mindset to actually do this? Okay. And that's where the day-to-day comes in. What is it they need to do? Is it to gather information about the job? Is it to reach out for testimonials and references? Is it to find out more about that team that they're going to enter? Is it to present experiences in their life that match that experience? There's a whole load of things they can do in that 30 days, which is going to be, which is going to help them reach that goal. And I think the most important thing is to stay with them I mean, I don't speak to them every day, but they know I'm there. They can just text me, oh, it's going great. Okay, I've got this, I've got that. And that accountability, and that's an AA principle. You know, we don't do anything alone. We do everything in community. And having your person is a very important part of this. And that person isn't there to say, it's almost like an accountability. Now, some people don't need that. They're very, I know one person who is, he's an athlete, he's very self-accountable. He doesn't ask for that necessarily. But many of us, including me, would need that accountability. So the person, and that could be a friend, by the way, that could be just a trusted person that you can go to and say, trying to do this, it's quite freaky, don't know how to get through. That person there is your accountability. That's their function. You might have someone else who's going to be a little bit more technically involved to help with the process, to help with the knowledge that you don't have. So it's not just one person, but it's really dialing into that process in the next 30 days. But you've got your destination. Well, let's forget about the destination and let's do the work.
You're really breaking it down. What is your opinion on the public accountability?
Oh, so can you be more specific?
Yeah,
I
so
mean, just
instead
the
of
day after the inauguration, so here in America. So
so something instead of having like that person, it would be, for example, I know someone who has a following on LinkedIn and shared some change they've committed to publicly in a post. So the repercussions would be, my image, my reputation, I'm not following through. All that there's consequences tied to that, and that individual would use that as extra motivation and accountability to do what they said they're going to do.
if that works for them, great. If they need that public, is that a branding tool, or is that something they really need? You know, is that something they really need to hold? I don't know how many people you're talking about here, because I work very much in the intimate space, Riley. You know, I'm talking about ordinary people, not public figures, or I'm talking about ordinary
Yeah,
people
sure.
who
I mean,
hold
even
jobs.
telling your family, let's
Even
say
telling your
that's
family.
right.
There's two schools of thought about this. There's some people that say, don't tell anybody, just hold it to yourself. Okay. And some people say, well, tell as many people as you want. And I think that will depend on how you're really, and I come back to this self-knowledge. I would tell some trusted people, but a few. That's my go-to. I wouldn't tell my whole family. And there's reasons for that. But I would tell specific individuals who I trust immensely with this change. Because if I hit some difficulties, I know they would support me, right? I don't know how much exposure I want to do with the whole world on this change, because they don't know the context of my situation. So I think context is very important here. So if that person, as you say on LinkedIn, wanted I don't know how many followers they have, to be some people will do it and some people won't. But it's a brave move, I will say. It's a very brave move.
Yeah, so I mean, motivation, consequences, those are individual, but it also sounds like the context is important for determining the level of support that that you need, which comes back to that self-awareness, self-knowledge piece we started off talking about. But but then B, um, that whoever that accountability partner is, are they going to actually have the context or the relationship with you to be in a position to, or to be able to support you in this change or transformation? It seems like that's more important
And
than just, yeah.
and that's interesting, Riley, because your accountability partner might be very specific to the goal. So it could be very it could have a professional goal, maybe someone who's not of your family because they don't understand your world
Yeah.
professionally. They understand you as a partner or a friend or a brother, sister or whatever. But actually professionally they don't know you so well. It's quite hard to do that. So maybe somebody, because I'm a person that would look for that, even in the workspace, can you support me here? And people love to help people. That's another thing. People love to help people generally, if they can do it. So to see you do well is what we're talking about here. Is you're asking someone to support your journey to success, and you're asking them just to keep you on track. With keep going. Yeah, you messed up, but just get back on it. It could be something very simple. It could be a 2-second WhatsApp. I'm struggling today. Hey, do you want to have a quick talk about it? I really believe in that peer support through the peers. You know, I know when I was in my formative learning years, it was my peers that sometimes took me through the exams rather than my mentors or my teachers. And
Yeah,
I think
love
that
that.
still probably applies. It's like these peers, but it could be as I say, that find the accountability partner in the context. So we always come back to context, and it's where we started. There's an individual and there's a context, and everyone might be subtly different. So choose accordingly. And I go back to the system of self-knowledge and journaling. And by the way, there's another tool I use for self-knowledge as well. But that will allow you to, yeah, I do need some support here. Let me pick the person who's best attuned to do that. And are they up for it? That's another thing. Some people, no, that's not my thing. I don't want to do that, but good luck with it. And move on, find someone else.
So we started that by talking about misconceptions as it relates to health and wellness, and I think we butted up a little bit about some misconceptions that come to more of the business or professional space. But before segueing into that, I just want to close this loop here and and ask you: are there any other major misconceptions when it comes to health and wellness that you think are important to address?
There's so many, Riley. I think there's
Maybe
no
the top
time.
one or two that.
I think it's either or. This is either or. Like
Yeah.
it's either uh, everything is bad about conventional medicine. Let's say that, and everything is good about alternative. And again, these are big tropes. It's like don't trust this field, don't trust this, don't trust this. And I think it's far, far more complex than that.
Yeah.
There's so much we can do for ourselves, and there's also the other support which can help. So I think the extremes, which we do find ourselves like, this is what you need for your health. You need to take these vitamins. It's actually, again, it's context. And I know several people, including myself, who have used both alternative medicine and conventional medicine to get through a major health challenge. And I'm glad for both of them. So I think there's another health myth there. There's be your best self. We're journeying towards that every single day. I mean, that's just come to me in the moment. I went, well, I'm trying to be the best self that I am now. Is there this mythical self out there that I might arrive at one day? But if I just say I'm here right now, and I'm showing up for this, and I don't want to be my best self in this moment, maybe that's good enough.
I think the in this moment part's important. It reminds me of
Yeah.
I think it's Matthew McConaughey, I don't know, acceptance speech of some award. And I remember him standing on stage, and you could probably find it on YouTube. And he said something about, his idols or his mentors or role models were. And he said he doesn't have any. He said all they are is himself 10 years from now. And he said, so I'm just trying to strive to be that person. This image I have, this vision I have for myself and what my best self is. And he said, and then 10 years from now, I'm not going to get there. And I know that. And I'm okay with that because when I get there, it's going to be 10 years from now. And I
Yeah.
think there's this really delicate balance of kind of this striving and yearning and pursuing and the 1% better conversation
Yeah.
and that end of things versus what you're saying of the you know this acceptance and this embodiment, and the the presence, I guess, is
Absolutely. And let's say your goal is to have 15 houses or something like that. That's your
sure.
destination, whatever that might be. It's
Yeah.
a hard goal. And usually it's related to having things. Usually it's quite materialistic. And there's nothing, by the way, great goal. It's not a judgment on the goal, but it's the process of becoming that we're talking about here. And the process of becoming is, it happens in the moment. And it's keeping the dream alive, or whatever that is, because that vision is very important. Like if you have no goal, I'm not going anywhere, well, you'll stay exactly where you are. Life will then have its own forces with you. But you say, no, I'm on this journey, and this is what I'm journeying towards. Then the everyday is going to count, because you are in the journey and the process of becoming. There's the doing and the being, and so maybe to you are becoming through both your presence of who you are, but also what you're doing. And it's not the amount of things you're doing, but it's doing the right things consistently.
The process. You almost made me say process right there.
Yeah, process.
So
I'm influencing with my British accent here.
I've got a lot of British influences. So just to recap here, and I want to rapid fire on just
sure.
two more here, and then we'll segue into the business conversation we were just talking about. So health misconceptions. 21 days to break a habit or break addiction. False. We've talked about that.
Well, it could be, but
It could,
not for.
yeah,
but if you set that up as your expectation and it doesn't work, then it's. Can you think about a seed planted in the soil? I just use this very small. So that seed, you're saying, I need to see it in a week, but the seed is still growing. It's still trying to find its way to the surface, and it's not there. And suddenly you cut it off when it's almost at the surface, and that might be 60 days. But you've cut it off because it didn't happen in your prescribed notion, because you've been told this will be 21 days by some kind of authority. But actually that seed needs a lot longer, because it's a big goal, and it needs the time to germinate, to come out of its, the way that a seed grows, to reach the surface, to reach the sun. And that's what we do. We put seeds inside ourselves and we nurture them. And the time it takes is the time it takes.
I'll rephrase to that. The time it takes is the time it takes.
Yeah.
I like that. Instead of 21 days, it's just the time it takes. So then the other was your best self. We talked about that. And so we've talked about a lot, but so rapid fire here. Therapy should be for life. Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Do you want to add a one sentence why? I'll give you space for that.
I think for you have a particular issue or something that you're coming through, and you work on that.
Yeah.
And you might have a space where you go, okay, I've worked on that. It's taken me 2 years. I feel more whole. I think that's what we're all feeling, more whole, more ourselves. And there might be you come back another time because you're ready to do another piece of work. But for life, who's benefiting from that?
I think you know what? That's a great question, and I'm just going to leave that question with the audience, because I think they can
just
figure
leave
that
that.
one
Who's
out.
benefiting from that? But I do think therapy is very powerful. I've had lots of therapy in my life,
For sure.
but for specific things at specific periods.
Yeah.
And I leave it open because Riley, it's a resource. It's a resource. And these therapists are very highly trained. They see things that we don't see. So very, very useful. But there comes a time where we need to maybe let that embed and embody and see how it is.
Yeah.
And then come back to it maybe.
Random one, last one here. Should walking count as exercise?
Yes. And I love that you asked me that. Because if you're maybe training for a marathon, and I have, then maybe you need to run every day or 5 times a week or whatever your training plan. But walking is the most natural, nurturing. You're breathing. You're with nature. You can walk fast. You can walk slow. You can walk up a hill. You can walk with your dog. You can walk with your friend. It's the most natural, accessible exercise available to us. So for me, yes, it is. It's movement. And all of life is movement. And we've got this myth that only hard activity, where our heart rate is at this, is the only movement that counts. Well, of course, that is useful to build muscle, to build endurance and all those things. But every day, what we need to do is move. And walking is the most natural thing given to us. So
Yeah.
yes, walk. I love walking personally. I love, because you could be in, it's time to think, it's time to reflect, it's time to be with your friend. It's a marvelous thing to do. And all I know is that in Italy, where I spent a number of years, you see the people of another generation walking with each other well into their 80s. Now, they're having a good life and they're walking, and they're still, that's what's available to them. It's free as well. No cost avoided.
Free as well. And for those interested who are thinking about a marathon, look into zone training and zone 2.
Okay.
And fast walking is actually, I'll leave that. People can Google that.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm going to Google it too.
Maybe we can talk offline about that one.